What's behind the Christian view? Well, that each individual human being, no matter what their economic status or educational background or where they were born or what their race or gender is, that every human being is created by God, more to it, redeemed by Christ, more to it, destined for eternal life. And from those theological convictions comes this idea that each individual is the subject of dignity. Well, the Vatican just came out with a document called Dignitas, Infinita, and there's been a lot of commentary upon it because of what it says about gender theory and so on. But I want to back away a bit from that issue and look at three general themes that I think are really worth spending some time with. First of all, the title itself, the infinite dignity of the human person. Now, I bet a lot of people, especially in the West, if you talk about the dignity of the individual person, would say, well, yeah, of course, that's true. But I want to suggest that of course it's true is not at all the right response. If you look at political arrangements and cultural assumptions across the ages and across the cultures, you'll find lots of exceptions to the view that each individual human person is a subject of infinite dignity. Look in the classical world. I mean, that the upper crust of society maybe was worthy of dignity, but the ordinary person, no way. Julius Caesar kills, they estimate, 1 million people in his campaign in Gaul, and no one called him to task for it as though he was violating people's dignity. Then, come right up through the ages to our own time. Look at the totalitarianisms of the last century. The dignity of each individual human being? Come on. In my own lifetime, in Maoist China, in Soviet Russia, I mean, there was an enormous disrespect, Nazi Germany, obviously, for the dignity of the individual. What I want to draw attention to is how peculiar, and I would say, with Tom Holland, the British historian, how distinctively Christian this view is. The fact that we take it for granted in the West is the result of our coming of age in a culture that's still largely determined by Christian assumptions. What's behind the Christian view? Well, that each individual human being, no matter what their economic status or educational background or where they were born or what their race or gender is, that every human being is created by God, more to it, redeemed by Christ, more to it, destined for eternal life. And from those theological convictions comes this idea that each individual is the subject of dignity. That's why I think it's wonderful, actually, that it's the Pope, it's the greatest representative of biblical religion on earth who's making this claim about human dignity. Now, watch it. Here's the implication. Watch it when as many in the West are suggesting, let's get rid of old, Christianity, old oppressive Christianity. Well, may I suggest, be very, very careful about that. Because you rip this plant out of the soil of Christianity, I think you'll find that the belief in human dignity evanesces pretty quickly. Here's the second kind of general motif that really struck me when I read the document. And I've talked about it before, but the wonderful strangeness of Catholic social teaching. What I mean here is it is simply impossible to categorize Catholic social teaching according to our clunky categories of left and right. Is Catholic social teaching liberal? Is it conservative? Is it more like the Democrats, more like the Republicans? I would defy anybody to read the issues raised in this statement, the things that the Pope feels violate human dignity, and tell me, oh yeah, this is clearly a Democratic Party statement, or clearly a Republican Party statement, clearly liberal, clearly conservative. Look, what's mentioned explicitly, great concern about the plight of migrants, great concern about the curse of war, great concern about the situation of those living in poverty, great concern about violence against women. Okay, those are at least in the standard reading, kind of left-wing preoccupations. And at the same time, Violations of human dignity include abortion, they include euthanasia, and indeed gender ideology, sex change, etc., all things that preoccupy the right. More to it, there are things, for example, human trafficking that come up that I think, well, pretty much everybody is against. So is this left? Is it center? Is it right? None of it. None of it. Catholic social teaching beautifully transcends this split. And there's a lot of reasons for that and where this split came from. But Catholic social teaching, it's its glory, I think. It's its pride and joy that it transcends these easy political divides. Here's the third thing that really struck me, and I will touch here on the gender issues. And it's a theme I've talked about, everybody, a lot, what I call the culture of self-invention. So in this letter, it's Cardinal Fernandez, who's responsible for it, the Pope has approved it, they talk about the divorce between freedom and truth. This is an old John Paul II theme too, isn't it? There's such a valorization of freedom in much of the West. It's become freedom run amok. It's freedom so divorced from truth that freedom now has the right to determine truth, to determine the nature of reality. You know, go back to Casey versus Planned Parenthood, 1992 in our country, when the Supreme Court said it belongs to the very nature of liberty to determine the meaning of one's life and the meaning of existence. I mean, one of the most absurd things ever said in the jurisprudence of any country. My freedom determines the nature of reality. But that's exactly what we have today in our culture. And you see it especially in regard to gender theory. I decide my gender. Well, what about your body, which seems to be kind of a given, that we're created male and female? Oh, who cares? The body can be changed because freedom, my freedom, is so absolute. Well, this is exactly what the church is speaking out against, and thank God for it. Can I read you just a quote directly from the letter I thought was very telling? Listen. Regarding gender theory, the church recalls that human life, both physical and spiritual, is a gift from God. This gift is to be accepted with gratitude and placed at the service of the good. Desiring a personal self-determination apart from this fundamental truth amounts to a concession to the age-old temptation to make oneself God. Dead right, it seems to me. He's going right back, to the book of Genesis, that when we grasp at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that means I determine for myself what's right and wrong, what's good and bad. No, freedom surrenders to the good. It surrenders to the truth and thereby finds itself. So can I just say, as I conclude here, thanks to Cardinal Fernandez and to Pope Francis, because I think in a culture that's sounding increasingly insane, this letter is an expression of sanity.